Part 3: ChatGPT's response to the letter written by the author of Grand Scheme of God in the Light of Quran to Stephen Hawking. ChatGPT's response is as follows. Thank you for sharing your detailed letter. I can see how thoughtfully you have reflected on both your personal experiences and your intellectual journey. Let's go through each part of the letter to analyze its clarity, logical flow, and relevance to the questions you are addressing in dialogue with Stephen Hawking's work. Introduction and quote from Hawking. You start with an appropriate introduction referencing a famous quote from Stephen Hawking's A Brief History of Time. This quote is an excellent hook because it aligns with both the existential questions you want to discuss and the themes of your letter. By connecting his thoughts to your own exploration of these questions, you establish common ground with him. This sets the tone for a reflective and philosophical discussion. Personal background. You introduce yourself and your background with honesty and humility, describing how you were not always religious and how your faith became more serious after the death of your mother. This humanizes your story and makes it more relatable. You clarify that your pursuit of answers is intellectual rather than blind faith, which is crucial in addressing someone like Stephen Hawking, whose own background is rooted in skepticism and scientific inquiry. Your explanation of how you first encountered the Quran via a personal loss and your transformation as a result of reading it sets up the deeper reflections that follow. It also resonates with many people's experiences of being forced to confront life's bigger questions during moments of crisis. Next heading: Question of accountability and afterlife. Here, you move into existential questions that arose from your reading of the Quran. You provide a passage from the Quran, that is, chapter 29, verse 64, and reflect on its focus on the afterlife and accountability. This is a clear and coherent line of thought. If the Quran's claims about the afterlife are true, then a person's life in this world must be reconsidered. The choice to include your struggle with wanting to disprove these ideas to maintain a carefree life adds depth, showing that your inquiry was not automatic or effortless, but rather a genuine search for truth. Your decision to explore this issue rationally rather than by sheer faith might resonate well with Hawking, who admired rational inquiry above all. Next heading: 5 spheres of reflection. Number 1. The universal moral law. You argue that moral concepts like justice and honesty are universally present across cultures and time. You suggest that if these were purely human constructs, they would vary more. This is a strong argument in favor of an objective moral order, which philosophers and theologians have long debated. However, critics might argue that cultural norms have evolved significantly over time. You could consider addressing potential counter-arguments here, such as moral relativism or evolutionary psychology, to strengthen the point. Point number 2: the human body. You marvel at the human body's complexity, focusing on its intricate systems. This argument, known as the argument from design, has classical roots and is often brought up in theological discussions. While compelling in highlighting the complexity and intentionality behind the body's functions, this might not fully engage with the scientific community's understanding of evolutionary processes. It would be beneficial to expand on the philosophical implications of design without sounding as though you are dismissing evolution, which Hawking would likely value. Point number 3, the universe. Here you delve into cosmology, pondering the precision of universe's design. You correctly focus on the fine-tuning argument that the universe seems precisely calibrated for life, which implies intentional design. This argument could appeal to Hawking, though his perspective might lean towards multiverse theories or quantum mechanics as an alternative explanation. Addressing these ideas briefly, even to show you have considered them, could strengthen your letter. Point number 4, Prophets' history. You ask why prophets' names are universally recognized and point to archaeological findings as evidence. This approach leans more toward historical than philosophical or scientific argumentation. While this point may resonate with believers, someone like Hawking might need more empirical or historical analysis to be fully convinced. Exploring how these figures were preserved in cultural memory might be an interesting way to deepen this reflection. Point number 5, the Quran's origins and preservation. The Quran's preservation and consistency over time is presented as a miracle. You quote Quran chapter 4 verse 82 and emphasize that if there were contradictions, the Quran itself invites scrutiny. This appeal to the Quran's internal consistency is solid, especially in comparison to other religious texts. However, you cite Dr. Maurice Bucay's work, which some critics see as controversial. Offering a more universally accepted authority on science and religion would help anticipate skepticism. Next heading, the concept of God. You clarify that God in the Quran is not like anything in this world, chapter 42, verse 11, and describe God as a perfect being with good attributes, who is beyond human imagination. This is a classic theological position, and you explain it well. You also address a common philosophical objection, that is, regression of creators, by distinguishing between creation and creator. This is well articulated and could appeal to those with a philosophical inclination. Next heading, distinction between Quran and Bible. Your comparison between the Quran and the Bible is direct and intended to explain why you turn to the Quran for answers. While this might resonate with readers who are already critical of biblical texts, Hawking might not be convinced by the way you frame the Bible, particularly since he may not have a personal attachment to it. Providing a more objective contrast, perhaps focusing on textual integrity or philosophical coherence, might make the comparison more persuasive. Conclusion, the grand scheme. The conclusion ties everything back to the concept of a personal God and the shift in your worldview. You address the very human tendency to resist changing a comfortable life in the face of challenging truths, which is a compelling personal insight. The mention of your ongoing work and willingness to share more of your conclusions invites continued dialogue, which is a great way to end. Overall analysis. Your letter is a sincere, well organized, and thoughtful reflection on existential questions and your journey through faith. You offer reasoned arguments from multiple angles, that is, moral, biological, cosmological, historical, and scriptural. And your tone is respectful throughout. Some areas could benefit from addressing scientific or philosophical counter-arguments more directly, particularly since you are writing to someone like Stephen Hawking, who might be more skeptical of religious conclusions. That said, your reflections will likely resonate with those who value both faith and reason, and your personal story of transformation gives the letter emotional depth. Thank you.